Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. And I don't know why, but I've been feeling like today's somebody's birthday or it's an event or something. But I can't stop shaking that thought. But regardless, this is the Duron Morning Show, episode 7, and we're going to be talking about what it means for something to be truthful, or what it means for something to be and where exactly we get this quote unquote truthful information from. And this might also dive into a topic related to this, which is what is considered right and what is considered wrong. But that in itself is its own conversation, its own topic. So I really want to try to stay focused on just defining what exactly the word. We know what the word true means, right? Like, we obviously know what true and false mean. So that's not what I mean when I say I want to define true. I want to define it as we know it in society. Meaning, if I tell you that information is true, how exactly do we know that? And not just false information or propaganda, a word that you guys have probably heard me use a lot over the last 2 or 3 episodes, but not just with those two things, but with anything. If I tell you, for example, if I tell you anything, and I mean that quite literally, if I tell you anything and you believe that on face value, how do you know that's true? And even if I support it with my own evidence and my own facts, still, how do you know that that's true? I could tell you that I got it out of a history book, and that still may not be true. Not only the sentence I'm saying, but the information that I'm giving. And that's what today's topic is going to be about. So let's dive into examples, and let's just dive into exactly what exactly it means for something to be true, and how we can do our best to try to verify quote-unquote truthful information, right? So let's just start at the top. What does it mean for something to be true? In general terms, something is true if it's considered factual. So if I tell you, yo, go outside, or if I tell you grass is green, and you take that as truthful information, you can look in history books, you can look in coloring books, you can look around and to see that that's truthful information. But the most important thing that you can do is you can go and verify that for yourself. You can go outside and, using the terms that we know as green, I mean, my green and your green may be different, but that's also a completely different conversation. But going by what society deems to be green, you go outside and you go, okay, then grass actually is green. This is truthful information. You were able to verify that yourself. So let's talk about opinions and how people try to construe that as true or being truthful. And we're just going to jump right into the craziest ends of the spectrums on these. Let's talk about Hitler and his whole Third Reich and the Holocaust, and how that misinformation was used to kill 6 million Jewish people. But not only was there hatred in that and bigotry, people actually believed that this information was true. And you being an outsider, or I mean, not even just you, but this happened obviously in the 40s, starting in 1941. America at the time, Canada, anybody that wasn't in Germany, looking from the outside, was looking like, yo, these people are crazy. What are they doing? What are they doing going around spreading this misinformation and spreading this hate? But Hitler and his cronies and the people that were in the direct circle quite literally believed this information that they were spreading to be true. we think these. I don't even know if it's safe for me to say the things he was saying. These are Hitler's opinions, not mine. But obviously, Hitler was going around saying that Jews are evil and they need to be rid of the world so that the people with blonde hair and blue eyes can rule the world. And it was crazy. And people, his henchmen and himself, and like even for a little while, the people of Germany, they all believed this is what needs to be done for us to move on to a better place. And if you came from the outside, let's say you traveled there, and a cousin of yours or something, a cousin said that to you, you'd be like, yo, I don't think that that's true. Like, I have Jewish friends, and they don't do these things that Hitler's saying. They seem to be fine. And because this has been indoctrinated into their culture, your cousin from Germany would be like, no, see, you just don't understand. You're not around our German Jews. And in their head, they really deem this information that they've been beat over the head with is truthful. So that is what begs the question: what is considered true? Because what one person believes to be true or right may not actually be true at all. Another odd end of the spectrum, one obviously that's going around right now, is Trump spreading the lies about the election being stolen, and people feel like they're coming out of the woodworks with quote-unquote evidence supporting this claim. And at the same time, I mean, I'm on. It also depends on what side you want to be true, because if you're coming from a Donald Trump supporter side, they're going to believe in their heart of hearts this election was stolen, and they can even find, like I said, quote unquote evidence to back that. Oh, they weren't in Pennsylvania. They weren't allowing us to view the polls like we were supposed to. In other states, Abraham Lincoln was being written on ballots, and people that are dead were registered to vote. So to them, like that's evidence, and those things are true. Those things were done, but does that mean that your ultimate case is true to prove that the election was stolen? Just because these things are true doesn't mean the ultimate thing is true. You know, that's like saying because there are stars, then there must be aliens. Well, yes, there most definitely are stars, but does that automatically mean that there are aliens? You can't just use one thing and say, well, this is true, so that's true. And like I look at it from the other side. I'll say it like this, and I'm not spreading any conspiracy theories or something. I'll say it like this: on the Donald Trump supporter side, they're looking at it saying, "Oh, this is a conspiracy, and we'll come to the bottom of this." Now, it would be blatantly wrong for someone that is opposing them to say, "Well, conspiracy theories don't come true, and it's just not. That's impossible," because we know that that's not true either. Edward Snowden released that he was the big NSA whistleblower that broke the conspiracy theory on the government basically watching us and recording everything we're saying on our phones. People for years, since the 2001 9/11 attacks, for years people were saying, I think the government is watching, I think they're tapping our phones, I think they're doing this and doing that, and they just denied it and denied it and denied it. And then the guy that helped them create the program was like, I'm tired of this. I can't do this anymore. And he broke the whole thing, broke the whole story. So conspiracy theories obviously are real too, even if it's denied. So that's another viewpoint that they're saying. Well, if conspiracy theories can happen, that means this one can happen as well. Because on the Joe Biden side, if that's what you want to call it, on the opposition of the on the opposition of, let's call it, what do we want to call it? Let's call it voter fraud gate or fraud gate in football, or in terms of when there's some type of conspiracy, they call it Watergate. Or in football, when Tom Brady had when the Patriots, not just Tom Brady, when the Patriots were flattening footballs, they called it Deflategate. So let's just call this Fraudgate. In the case of Fraudgate, if you're on the for side, if you believe it, then I guess you would be considered on Trump's side. If you're opposed to it or against it, you would be on Biden's side. So look at the for side of it. They're saying that these conspiracies can happen. So on the opposition side, you have to look at it and say, they're saying, well, in the court systems, they said there wasn't enough quote unquote evidence to support us doing a recount or even taking into consideration these quote unquote stolen ballots. If you're on the for side, on the Trump side, they're saying, well, they were in cahoots with all the judges and blah blah blah. That they want a conspiracy theory to be true, so they're always going to lean towards that being true. On the opposition side, same thing. I mean, it's still the same thing, unless you go and do the work to verify it for yourself, because you heard that there's not enough evidence for a recount. We're going to believe, well, the judges don't have anything to lose, and of course we believe their information. But how do you, as a civilian that's not in those court systems, know that that's true? We're just going to believe it because, I mean, for the most part, we don't have an incentive to not believe them. A lot, if not most people want Donald Trump's presidency to end. I mean, there's still 74 million people that voted for him that don't want it to end. But, I mean, there's a lot of people that want it to end. So there's going to be a lot of people that believe, oh, well, of course there was no voter fraud either. So it's a two-sided coin, which is what the whole topic about is today. How do we know that these things are true? And that brings me to the big one of all, and this is a touchy subject that's going to get everybody riled up. The biggest one of all of these is people's belief systems, and most. How do I want to say this? The biggest one I would say is religion, but not just that. I'm not just going to pick on religion. Your belief system in anything. If you grow up believing that even if you want to use sports, that obviously those are opinions. So this one isn't too heavy, but still, if you want to use sports where people they brag about, I'll just use the Steelers or something. They say the Steelers are the best, or the Steelers have 6 championships, so that's something that they can use as a stat. I'll use something like the Eagles. I'm an Eagles fan, so if I come out and I say the Eagles are the best organization ever, they're the best team, it's irrefutable. You can't argue against it, and I believe that to be true. I mean, someone that is a Steelers fan could come out and say, well, just based off stats, we're better. We have 6 championships, and the goal of football is to win championships. Now, that all that information is true as well. They do have 6 championships. So then as a Patriots fan, someone might come and say, well, we have 6 championships too, and over the last 20 years we've been better. So actually we're the better team. That information is true as well. But like I said earlier, just because there's stars doesn't mean there has to be aliens. Just because one thing is true doesn't have to mean the other things are true as well. Just because the stats do say, yes, the Steelers do have 6 championships, that doesn't automatically mean they are the best team. The Patriots, the New England Patriots, do have 6 championships. That doesn't automatically mean that they're the best team. The Dallas Cowboys, I believe they only have 3 or 4 championships. Maybe max it's 5, but I'm almost sure it's 4. They're considered the wealthiest sports organization, like of all of them, not just sports, but of any sport anywhere, soccer, baseball. The Dallas Cowboys are considered the wealthiest sports organization. Are they the most successful? Are they quote unquote the best? I mean, it's a fact and it's true that they are the most valuable. But what considers them to be the best? Same thing goes with religion. So I can pick on them a little bit. I myself don't consider myself to be very religious just because of the way my thought process is. Because just like how I'm talking about now, I can't really tell what the truthful information is, and that's not how I was. I was raised. I was raised to be a Christian. My grandmother and my mother, they're devout Christians. But what I learned and what I've been, yeah, what I've learned throughout the way as I grew up is, I don't know about all this. And I always like to make that distinction for people. There's a difference between what you were raised to know and what you learned growing up. Learned is your community, the outside influences of your world. Raised is what you were taught inside your home and what has been brought up in your lineage through generations. That's what you've been raised to know. If you were raised like your parents raised you to know what they believe wrong versus right is, and what belief systems you should put into yourself, but then you learn along the way, I don't know about this, or I feel this way about that, and that's fine. I mean, that's part of the growing up process. So like I was just about to say, picking on religion, there's so many different religions that, and every single one of them believe their information to be true. And they all have evidence, quote unquote evidence, that says it's true. So how do you dispute it? How do you fight it? This isn't going to be a TED talk about what I believe or how I believe, but the quick 2 sentences about that is, the way I believe it is, you let everyone believe what they want to. That's all you can do, because you can't argue and say my Jesus is right and your Buddha is wrong, and my Allah is right and your Hinduism is wrong. Like you can't. It's just not right. It's not the nice thing to do anyway, whether it be right or wrong. It's not the nice thing to do. And wars have been started over religion. We all know that. There's been wars started over religion just because that is how much people believe their information to be true. And it all just stems from a book. And not just the Bible. Like I said, I'm not just picking on Christianity or the Bible, but every single religion. It stems from a book. Whether it be the Quran, and I won't lie, that is the only other book I know. I don't know the Jewish book or or like a Buddhist book or anything like that. But I know that they all have books as well, or scrolls or something that tell the lost stories of the gods and what went on. And even doesn't have to be what's considered a religion like Islamic or is Islam, or like Christianity or Judaism. It could be something like Greek mythology or Norse mythology. There are books on those too, and they have stories of the gods that they use their powers to create the world. And as far as Greek mythology, all the gods live on Mount Olympus, and there's all these stories. For the most part, and maybe this is just my location based because I'm in America, but for the most part, Greek mythology is looked just as that. It's looked at as a myth. But if you tell the same stories with Christianity and you say, well, Jesus walked on water and Jesus brought people back to life, and there was and he turned water into wine, and he rose from the dead after 3 days, people are like, yep, I read that in the Bible, so it's all true. And they will shove that down your throat because they believe that to be true. However, if you look at I can't say this as a fact, but maybe if we went to Greece, and maybe they really do believe in Zeus and Athena and the gods of war, and the gods of and Helios, and the god of sunlight, and Artemis, the god of the moon, and all these other gods that they believe in. And if you go over there and say, these people are crazy, that's the same way they look at you. And I was telling this to my girlfriend yesterday, if you want to use the same analogy, the way that these people argue about religion is the same way that I look at the way that the people are arguing about voter fraud. And that's just the 100% truth. If these people, I'll say it like this, because maybe this will make more sense. If these people that really believe in it, right now it's 2021, if these people that really believe in voter fraud spew this, there's 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump. So let's just say that they all actually believe in this voter fraud, right? And they spew this to their kids, and then they write a book about it, and their kids spew that to those people's grandkids, and then their grandkids do it to their great-grandkids, and this goes on, right? That the 2021 election was stolen from us. Not that it will bring an uprising or anything like that, but let's just say that is really what they believe in. Their belief system now is the 2020 election was stolen from us, from Donald J. Trump. So what they do is they write a book and they use their evidence and they say exactly how that was done, that was stolen from them. And then people on the outside, they go, yo, these people still believe that. These people are crazy. And if you go and talk to any of them, they're like, no, there's evidence that proves that this really happened. You can use the same thing with religion. I mean, for me, it's the same thing. People on the outside look at the whether it be Christians or Buddhists or whatever, and you say, oh, they say my religion is the truth based off this book. And like I said, I'm not picking on any one. This is all of them. They say it's true based off of this information that I'm given. People from the outside go, yo, that's just not true. And it's the same thing as the voter fraud. It's just something that had been, if in that scenario, something had been passed down 100 years later and they still believe this, they go, well, based off the book, and they weren't there to verify it. Everyone at that point would probably be dead. So there's no one, unless we live to be as old as Betty White. So if we're not there to verify it and say, oh, this did or did not happen, they can only go by what was put in the book. That's the same thing that they do in the Bible. That's the same thing they do in the Quran. They go from these stories, this information that's been passed down to them. But is it true just because it's in a book? I mean, every single day or week or month, it doesn't really matter what timeline you use, you have people arguing online that certain books, whether there's some history books in schools, K through 12, that they're saying shouldn't even be allowed on the shelves because it spreads misinformation. But that was the information that we were allowed to be taught. It got published, it got verified, and they taught it to us in schools. And now, years later, they're saying, oh, that's not actually how the history happened. So what exactly is the truth then? The truth is only, in my opinion, the truth is only things that you can verify. And I know I'm a mathematics nerd, so this is very biased, but things like math, those are truths that can't be argued against. They're verifiable. If I tell you to go outside and use physics and math to measure, or there's already measurements to tell you have to go exactly 6 feet away, and I can use this slingshot or something, or this catapult, and it'll go exactly 6 feet if you do A, B, and C. If you do these exact things, and then it does that, well, then that's verifiable. But if I'm religious and I say, well, Jesus walked on water, so that's why we have to pray to him every night. And I mean, I can't verify that, but that's what I've been taught for 18, 19, however, 30, 60 years. It doesn't matter the timeline. If that's just what you've been taught or raised upon, then how can you not believe it? If you feel like you've had events in your life that were divine and not just coincidence, not anything like that, then that's also a way for you to believe that information. But that ultimately is because as humans, we need to believe in something to keep going. And in my opinion, religion is a great foundation to believe in. It teaches people how to walk a good path of life. Like, for example, in Christianity, the Ten Commandments, they say thou shalt not steal, thou shalt love your parents. Like, those are good commandments to live by and to live a healthy life. But that doesn't mean that just because that is also a fact doesn't mean everything else in the Bible is true. So let's jump back onto that in belief systems and why exactly it is we need something to believe in. And that's also why the world is so left and right, A and B, black and white. We want to be on sides. It builds community, and it gives us something to keep going for or keep going with. If I go around moping and I don't believe anything, and that goes, and that, how do I want to word this? That goes for things that are verifiable as well too. Math. There are people that don't believe in the math. If you tell people that they're, I'll just use, are they calling it climate change now? Or what are climate change is the right term. They recalled it something else. Oh, global warming. And they said they can't say that because in some parts it's getting colder. So it actually confused people. Like, oh, you're saying the world's getting warmer, global warming, but it's getting colder in some places. So climate change is what they're calling it now. There's some people who really oppose that because they say the math is not verifiable. And some people say that it is. So which one is true? The only thing, and I mean, same thing with the earth, the people saying the earth being flat, that builds community. There's a whole community behind the earth being flat, and there being huge walls around Antarctica and preventing us from falling off, or if you can get to the end, you will fall off, something like that. There's a whole community behind that, just believing that the earth is not spherical, but it's flat. And there's math that says it's spherical. The only way that we can survive on this planet is because it's spherical and it rotates on an axis, and it's a gravitational pull going around the sun. If any of those things weren't constant and weren't true, we would die immediately. But none of that matters because people do math regarding the earth being flat, and they say, oh, well, if you do these constants and do these things, the earth could potentially be flat. And some of their math is right. But I was reading something the other day, or maybe it was a YouTube video, and they said the thing about those conspiracy theorist people is they'll be able to prove one thing or find an anomaly. So that's what they base their whole entire belief system off of, or their whole theory. They'll find, I'll just use an example, I guess. I don't really have a big example, but if they find that rain droplets collect 2 inches or something, because if the earth was rotating, it wouldn't be able to do that, and it needs to be flat. I made that up. I don't know if that's true. So the earth is flat because the rainwater doesn't roll away when it rains or something. I don't know. They're saying, well, this is true, so the whole theory is true. And that is not the case at all. Same thing with aliens. I really want to believe in aliens, but there isn't any evidence that there are any yet. But people will find an anomaly, something that measures off from the theories that we already have, and they'll say, well, this must be true. And honestly, I don't want to spew the rhetoric that you can't believe anything, because that's not true. No pun intended. But even the things that people believe that used to be true have come out, and we found out that they weren't true. And things that we deemed to be verifiable. I just came out 10 minutes ago and I said I believe in mathematics and science because it's verifiable and you can go outside and test it. There was science that was verifiable and deemable in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s that is not true now. It was very much believed by scientists all around the world that the Earth was the center of the universe, and if not the universe, at least our galaxy. It was the center of it, and everything evolved and revolved around us. That we had the biggest gravitational pull, and everything that revolved around us, not the sun. Even the sun revolved around us. And it wasn't just something that was believed for 1 year or 2 years. That was believed for hundreds of years, lifetimes of people. So people were taught that in school and died believing that that was true. If they came back today, because of future technology, we bought a commoner from the 1400s back to today, not only would their clothes and their speech and everything look different, if we taught them the science that we know, they'd be like, that's just not true. So how can we say that science from back then that was verifiable is quote unquote true when it has changed? There's science from the 1900s and that's only 100 years ago, that we have now found out is not true. And it's not that it's completely wrong or false, if that's the word you want to use, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Like I don't remember the exact model for the Earth being the center. I know the sun being the center is called the heliocentric model, meaning helio meaning sun, centric meaning center. Sun is center. But when the Earth was considered the center, they were doing their math around the Earth being the center of the galaxy universe, and that's why their math was able to work out the way it did. But then people found anomalies, and they said, I don't know if exactly the model that you guys are using is true, and then that ended up being the truth. If you used the heliocentric model, you were able to not only do the same find out those same calculations that the Earth central model could, but also the anomaly ones too. So why am I spewing science and galaxy talk right now? Because that's the same thing with these quote unquote conspiracy theorists and these flat earthers. They're trying to reverse the model. They're saying, if this was false before, and if we found a better model, how do we know that the one that we're using right now is true, is 100% factual? And you can't argue with that logic. I mean, I'm not a flat earther. I believe that the Earth is spherical and we're revolving around the sun. But I understand their logic to find different answers. And I can't fight with them for wanting to find different answers. Because like I said, it's not to be pessimistic, but you really can't believe anything that you hear unless you can verify it. And even then, if you can verify it, it still might not be true. If you can verify it with your own eyes, that's even better though. If someone tells you somebody's taller than you and you haven't met them yet, the best way to verify it is to meet them and see that they're taller than you with your own eyes. But if you try to build up the scale and say, well, it's going to take us 6 to 9 months to get to Mars because it's X miles away. I mean, you can believe that. If they tell us how many miles away it is, there's math to figure out how long it would take us to get there. But how do you know that it's actually that far away? That's not something that we are able to find out by ourselves. And once again, you could do the math and get a telescope and do all that. That's the verifying part. But a lot of what we do, we being society, is we're kind of forced I'm going to use the word forced lightly, but we're kind of forced to believe what we hear. Because we have all of us have a lot going on, so that we can't stop and verify every little thing. And that's proven through media. The media has been very manipulative to try to show us what exactly is true. And it only has to be simple wording. It doesn't have to be something like an ultimate blatant lie, which it can be that too, but it doesn't have to be. So you look around and you try to find what exactly is true. You try to find the meaning of life and what to make sense of everything, but you really don't know. I know a lot of my friends that were raised to be very religious aren't religious now today, because they throughout their journey, throughout their life, they learned different models of thinking. And in general, like I said, this is not about to be a bash religion talk, but in general, it doesn't make sense to me that every single religion, somewhere in their book, says this is the only religion. If you believe in any other religion, you're just blatantly wrong, and you need to be casted off from the world, and everyone needs to shut you out if you believe in any other religion. How can every single religion say that when there's hundreds? I honestly don't know how many there are. There could be thousands, tens of thousands. I really don't know. But there's at least 10 that people know off the top of their head. And all of those ones, too, say the same thing. And in my opinion, they all stem somewhere from the same place. Because way back when, millions of years ago, or I don't know how many years ago, to be 100% honest, hundreds of thousands, millions, I actually don't know the complete science on this, but when humans were closer together, when all the land masses were, when I say land masses, the continents, all the continents were together in Pangea. And I was trying to stray away from saying Pangea, because I think with Pangea there weren't humans yet. But anyway, when the world was closer, whether it had been the Ice Age or whatever, when the world was closer, I think that we all shared some of the same beliefs. And then when the world split up, we took those beliefs and made them our own, which is why every single religion has some form of cataclysmic storm or cataclysmic flood, like whether it be what's that guy's name with a G, Gilgamesh or Gilgamesh, something like that. And then there's Noah's Ark, and then there's Poseidon in Greek mythology flooding the world. There's in 3 different religions I just named. There's 3 different, if you want to call them different, cataclysmic storm events when they might all be the same. They all talk about some type of event where the world was on fire, when in the Bible Jesus struck down some city. What was the name of that city? Some heretic city, and the lady looked back and turned into salt. They always talk about how the world was on fire. That's not just a Christianity story. That happens in several books of religion. What if that's all the same event, told different ways? That would be like if 100 people, 50 people were at a party, and then you got 50 different perspectives. Am I going to tell that one person that their perspective is wrong because that I was downstairs the whole time and they were upstairs? We might tell the exact moment that a song was on. Dreams and Nightmares came on, and I was downstairs, and the lights were green, and this, and just describing all these things. People were jumping around, where someone upstairs might say Dreams and Nightmares came on, and people were fighting upstairs. The lights were yellow. Someone turned the lights off. Like, they might tell a completely different story from 2 different perspectives. And I'd be wrong to say that one was true and one was false, because they're both right. They're part of one bigger story. And I think that type of thinking builds, like I said earlier, people need some form of belief system to build community, to feel whole within themselves, to figure out why exactly we're here. That's the big question, the big psychological and philosophical question that everyone asks themselves. What am I doing here? What is my purpose? What is the human's purpose? Why are we alone in the universe? And I think that is why we try to cling on to some form of a belief system. And I think if there was a bigger belief system, or if there was like a new, not a new religion, because no one would leave their current one, but if there was something that showed people, and I think that something eventually will be AI, we'll talk about that another time, but I think if there was something to show people, hey, all you guys are actually connected, and you guys have been fighting wars or fighting each other or bashing each other and saying my God is better than your God, or my gods with an S, if you go to Egypt or something, my gods are better than your God, when in reality you guys are all telling the same story. I was watching, this will probably be my last story before I wrap it up, and I go to the Q&A, but I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and this man, he's an environmentalist, and he is an archaeologist, and he goes around to remote places, and I wish I could remember his name for you guys, but he goes to remote places and tries to like help them out, and it's a lot of these remote places are banned, like you are not allowed to travel there, so he has to go through a lot of permissions to try to get these accesses. And the one time that they were going to go, they were flying a helicopter, and they were going to dive into the water and go to this remote island where outsiders have never been. So they still live, I don't want to go back that far, but they still kind of live like cavemen, or like hunters and gatherers, if that's what you want to say. They don't have shoes, they live in the jungle, and they fight the animals. There's no electronics, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that. So to get to the point, they were in a helicopter, and these people saw them, and they were all looking at them at first, just looked like pointing and jumping, looking at them crazy. And then eventually the warriors got like bows and got staffs and started throwing it at them, or started aiming at them, so they had to fly away. And he was telling a story, and he said that was one of their first attempts, and that's when they kind of conceptualized or realized we can't approach them like that, because now that might have changed their whole outlook on society. That might form a new religion. That might form a new ideological thinking. They've never seen any technology. So what was this big, flapping, loud thing in the sky? They might look at it, and that might be their new sun god. That might be the new god of wind, or a god of change, or something. And they realize that without even stepping foot on the island, they had changed that society forever. And to make it all wrap together, let's just fast forward 1,000 years. Let's say people still are unable to contact that society, and we have to leave them alone still. Like, there's still laws that say we have to leave them alone. Now, if they tell stories about the one time the new sun god came, and this is what they've just been taught their entire lives, and now let's say someone actually goes on a boat there, and they go on a boat there, and they also know about the previous time that America, or not even America, the outside world tried to come in here. So they go in there, and they don't fight them, and they allow them, and then someone sees, like, they tell these stories about this flying, if they even call it that. They might even not even know the word flying, but they saw this god being. It didn't look like man. It was a shapeshifter. It had hair on its head that flapped around and made it hover. Like, these are the things that they're saying about it. That person from the outside world would probably go like, well, no, that was us trying to contact you guys 1,000 years ago. That was just a helicopter. And they're like, so you guys are gods? And it's like, no, we're just people from the outside world. We're regular people. We just have technology. And they're like, no. what my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was telling him, like the shaman of this whole entire island. All the shamans passed down information to each other, and this is what they know, and this is what they believe in. And since it's been 1,000 years, let's say they haven't had too much advance in technology, but they've had some form of advances. They might really believe that their information is truthful. They're like, no, this is what we've been taught forever, for thousands of years, so this is what is true. Whereas we, from our perspective in our outside world, we say, no, you guys are incorrect with the information you have. And I think a lot more of that goes on in our society than what we currently know, if you ask me. I think, I don't know if there have been aliens, I don't know anything about that, but if you go to Egyptian hieroglyphics and you look at the pictures that they've taken, and people draw what look like aircrafts and what look like submarines, and they draw these things. And since the Earth has been around for 13.4 billion years, I think it'd be very arrogant of us to think that this is the first time, if you want to look at it in the last 400-ish years, if you even go back, say 500, and go back to Da Vinci. I think like Da Vinci was really like the start of technological innovation. So let's just go back 500 years to him. If you say in the last 500 years, this is the only time in human history that we have had these technologies, I think that's very arrogant. And I think our history has really repeated itself a lot more than we know. And the information that we think is true is not even close. All right, and that wraps up episode 7 for me. To do a quick recap, we talked about what exactly it means for information to be true, and where evidence of truthfulness can come from, and what exactly it means to have verifiable information versus what exactly it means to have verifiable information, and if in history's past we've seen that information hasn't lasted that long. And then we talked about religion and what people have been raised to know, rather versus what they have learned throughout their own journey, throughout their own history, throughout their own lessons, and trying to find what you deem as the truth opposed to what the world is telling you to believe in. All right, so now I'm going to open up the floor for questions. I had one hand raised. As I always say, you can introduce yourself if you want to. If not, you don't have to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Preston. I'm 24 years old. I'm into IT consulting. I just wanted to say you brought up like a really great point with like how people could come up with their own conceptions of things, and for me, I think it's like interesting or kind of scary to think about, right? Like all the conspiracies. Like I grew up with a Christian foundation, and I think like the Bible has a lot of like stories that are analogous to things that happen in real life. And something that kind of sticks out to me nowadays is like the one thing, I don't remember which scripture it was, but it said like the devil's like greatest lie or whatever is convincing the world that he doesn't exist. And it makes me think of like, people kind of talk about there's these like this higher society that kind of controls everything and is manipulating everything. And it makes you wonder, like on one hand, I'm like, all right, if all these conspiracies were true, it's like there's no way they could keep, this many people quiet. Like, for example, with the vaccines, people think the vaccines have chips or stuff like that. Like, I'm like, there's no way they could have all these doctors and all these people in healthcare. It's like nobody's filling the beans. Like, that would be crazy to me. But I'm also like, that would, if they were able to pull something like that off, that would be kind of like the David Blaine of, like, societal magic tricks, right? There really is this upper society running the world and, like, controlling world events and things like that. It's like we would never know if they're actually pulling it off, and like that means what they're doing is working. But at the same time, it's also like I feel like it's hard for my mind to grapple that humans could be capable of something like that. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Like I know 100% exactly what you mean, and thank you for your input. That was a lot to wrap my head around as well. The the only reason I start to believe, I don't want to word this. There's not a lot of conspiracy theories that I believe in. Like I used to really believe in the moon landing conspiracy, the one that people say, "Oh, we didn't land on the moon," and I don't believe in it as much now. I mean, barely at all. Just the cost. It would cost a lot more to try to. It would cost a lot more to try to fake that than it would to go there. And at the same time, we did have a lot of incentives to go there because it's been proven like that Russia actually did go there first. So we had a lot of incentives to actually go to the moon. But why did I jump to that? The biggest falter with that conspiracy theory for me was what you said about the higher society. I was like, would everyone at NASA really be able to hide that? Like, people who had jobs to do and were really being employed, and we're going to just believe that all of them were actors. So I was like, I don't know. I just don't believe that. But then when the NSA conspiracy came out a couple years ago with Edward Snowden, that kind of reopened a lot of things for me, because if the NSA was able to hide that, and there wasn't too many people involved in that, according to, I've seen the documentary. I've seen the documentary, but I haven't read Edward Snowden's like monologues, or I haven't read any of his evidence. But from the documentaries, it seems as if he and maybe 3 or 4 of his coworkers were involved, and then maybe his manager and his boss and like their bosses. So let's just round. I'm going to go a heavy round and say maybe 15 people were involved in what was going on with the NSA. So they were able to hide it all, and that's something huge that they were able to accomplish. It's not as big as launching a rocket where people are witnesses and they're saying, "Yo, I literally watched this rocket take off." That is harder to hide than just information in a computer program, because they had a computer program that was able to, you could literally, the way they wrote it, and they partnered with AT&T and Verizon and all the telecommunications networks. They were able to basically just type in your name and whatever information they needed, and that was able to go to an email, a phone call, a text message. That was able to go to anything. So they weren't, I mean, I'm going to say this loosely, but they weren't exactly monitoring you like how The Simpsons played it out. They weren't like, oh, I have headphones and I'm listening to you and I'm watching you. But they were able to, if they needed anything, if you ever said like bomb, president, and this, they were literally just able to look up your name and bomb and just look up anything you've ever said using the word bomb any time. And they did that to actually coerce a lot of heads of countries and capitals and stuff. What they would do, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, so I'll just tell like a quick story. What they would do is they would, let's say, look up, I'm just going to name John Jones, but let's say John Jones is the head of Iraq. They would look him up, find out his daughter's name, find out their cousin's name, and then be like, oh, their cousin is a transfer student to Yale. That's a talking point. Then they would meet them at a dinner party or at a whatever, and use that inside information that they had now, and say, oh, I actually met your cousin in Yale. That's how I know who you are. And they're like, oh, you know them? And that would be their inside information to try to get close to them. Like, it was the fact that they were able to hide all that and do this was crazy to me. And I learned that all through the documentary, and I was like, this is crazy. So, just like you said, having a foundation and learning all these things, and then also seeing how society is shaped, it makes you question everything, because you don't know what's true. And I know the Bible verse you're talking about. I don't remember the exact verse and chapter either, but I know exactly what you're talking about. All right. Is there any other questions or any inputs? All right. If there's no other questions or any other inputs, I'm going to wrap it up there. I think that this was a great show. A lot of people actually think that the shows that I think are bad are really good. So maybe they'll think that this one's horrible. But I think that this was a great show. We have one more question.
This wasn't so much a question. I know you're trying to wrap things up. I just wanted to bring up another quick point. Mostly in regards to what you were saying about, like the Edward Snowden thing and stuff like that. Like that's like, well, I mean, one, like I actually do believe there's things that like our government do behind the scenes. Actually, on my first day at Clubhouse, I was speaking to a guy. He was in the Army. He was explaining to me like SEAL Team 6. And what he said to me was that SEAL Team 6 is the only part of the armed forces where they answer directly to the president. He doesn't need anyone's approval to like use them. So he can literally be like, yo, like go to this country and kill this guy. And like they will like go in, go out, like quiet, undercover, and like take out the enemy. And like nobody will know. Like that's what they did for Osama bin Laden. And it's like, I feel like something like with the NSA, there's like a small group of people involved. It's easier to keep it under wrap. Like I think Edward Snowden thing is definitely true because that's why the government wants him. And Russia being our enemy, they're like, yeah, we have him here, but we're not going to give him to you because Russia, like, they know like Edward Snowden kind of screwed them over. So I think that was just like an interesting point to mention. Like I definitely think like that was an instance where one of those big truths got out, and it was like if the U.S. government ever does get a hold of him, like he's going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a question in this world that what Edward Snowden said is false. Like I know that this whole episode was about what is true and what's not, but he had a lot of he went out of his way to verify a lot of his information to prove that I'm not just doing this just because, but to show that this is what the people need to know. And also, he has sacrificed years and years and years of his life, his marriage, just to do this. So I don't think that this was a false stunt or I don't think that this is even a word, but a non-truthful act. So I don't think that that's the case. But all in all, like I said, this was a great show. This is the end of episode 7. I will see you guys tomorrow morning, and you guys have a beautiful day, all right? Thank you, everybody.